My daughter's tiny hands clutched mine as my parents shouted, "Get your kids out of our house. We only have room for our real grandchild." The words slammed into me like a wall of ice. My daughter's lip trembled, my son's eyes filled with tears, and I felt my whole body shaking. I wanted to scream, to tell them how cruel they were being, but my throat locked up. My parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect my children, had just slammed the door on them as if they were strangers. And in that moment, standing on the porch with two sobbing kids pressed against me, I realized something I would never forget. My heart was breaking, but they had no idea what was coming. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive deeper into this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing the different places my viewers are tuning in from. Your support means everything, and it helps me keep sharing these stories with you. Now, let me take you back to how all of this started. Because what happened that night, my parents kicking out my kids in favor of their so-called golden grandchild, didn't come out of nowhere. It was years of favoritism building up like a storm, waiting for the moment it would finally explode. My name is Claire, and I was 29 when this all happened. A young mom with 2 kids, my daughter was 7, my son was 5. We didn't have a big, perfect life, but we had love. And that, I thought, was enough. I worked long hours as a receptionist at a clinic in Denver. Most days, I barely had time to catch my breath between getting the kids ready for school, rushing to work, then coming home to cook dinner, check homework, and tuck them into bed. Life was busy, exhausting, and sometimes lonely. But when my kids wrapped their arms around me at night, I knew I was doing something right. Still, there was always this, wait. My parents. Growing up, I'd always known I wasn't the favorite. My younger sister's son, my parents' golden grandchild, seemed to shine in their eyes in a way I never could. From the moment he was born, they showered him with gifts, affection, and endless praise. Every visit, it was the same. Look how smart he is. Look how handsome he is. Look how polite he is. And then, like clockwork, their eyes would turn to my kids. My mom would wrinkle her nose when my daughter tried to show her a drawing. My dad would sigh when my son tripped over his shoelaces. "You need to discipline them more, Claire," they'd say. "They're too wild." "Not like your sister's boy." I hated it. But I kept bringing my kids around anyway. Why? Because I wanted them to know family. I told myself my parents' favoritism wasn't intentional, that maybe I was just too sensitive. I hoped, prayed, that if I kept the peace, things would get better. There were moments when I almost believed it. Like when my dad took my daughter fishing one Saturday, and she came home glowing with excitement. Or when my mom baked cookies with my son and let him lick the spoon. Small moments that made me think, maybe they do love my kids. Maybe it's all in my head. But those moments never lasted. One Sunday afternoon, we went over for dinner. My daughter, shy but eager, sat down at the piano in their living room. She had been practicing a song for weeks and wanted to play it for them. Her little fingers stumbled over the keys, but she pushed through, finishing with a nervous smile. Instead of clapping, my mom leaned back and said, "Well, it's not bad. But your cousin could play that perfectly when he was 5. My daughter's smile faded, her small hands folding into her lap. Later that night, my son knocked over his glass of milk at the dinner table. My dad's voice boomed, "This is why we can't have you kids over too often. You don't behave. You're not as well-mannered as your cousin." I froze. My kids sat there, their faces burning red, staring down at their plates. They didn't even cry. They just shrank into themselves. I wanted to scream at my parents, to defend my children, but the words stuck in my throat. I swallowed my anger and said nothing, because I told myself, again, that keeping the peace was more important. But in my heart, something cracked. I started noticing the small digs more often. How my mom would only display pictures of my sister's son on the fridge, while my kids' school photos sat in a drawer. How my dad would show off videos of the golden grandchild soccer games but never ask about my daughter's art contests or my son's science projects. It was like my kids didn't exist in their world, except as shadows standing next to the child they truly adored. And yet, I kept bringing them over. Maybe because I didn't want my kids to grow up without grandparents. Maybe because I still craved my parents' approval, even after all these years. Or maybe because I wasn't ready to face the truth, that no matter what we did, my children would never be enough for them. The day it became undeniable started out ordinary. We walked in, my kids holding their little backpacks, excited to spend time with Grandma and Grandpa. My daughter had made a drawing for them, a bright picture of our family standing under a big yellow sun. She ran up to show it to my mom. But my mom barely glanced at it. "That's nice, dear," she muttered, before turning back to fuss over the golden grandchild, who was showing off a new toy car. At dinner, my dad leaned over to me and said quietly, but loud enough for my kids to hear, "Claire, your children are too much. They're not as well behaved, not as smart. You really need to get them under control. Not everyone can handle kids like yours." I looked at my daughter, staring down at her plate, her cheeks flushed with shame. My son was poking his peas with his fork, pretending he didn't hear. That was the moment I realized, no matter what I did, my parents would never see my children for who they were. They would always measure them against the golden grandchild, and my kids would always come up short in their eyes. And I thought that was the worst it could get. The criticism, the comparisons, the quiet humiliation. But I was wrong. Because the day they told my kids to leave their house, that's when the mask came off. It was a Saturday afternoon when it finally happened. My kids were bouncing with excitement in the back seat as I drove to my parents' house. My daughter clutched a small craft she'd made at school, a beaded bracelet she wanted to give to my mom. My son had his favorite book tucked under his arm, eager to read a story to his grandpa. For them, visits to Grandma and Grandpa's house were special. No matter how cold my parents had been in the past, my kids still walked in with hope. They still wanted love. When we arrived, I rang the doorbell, and almost immediately, my mom opened the door. But her smile wasn't for us. It was for the golden grandchild, who was already running around the living room in a brand new outfit. "There's my sweet boy," she cooed, sweeping him into a hug. She barely glanced at my kid standing right behind me. "Hi, Grandma," my daughter said softly, holding out the bracelet. My mom waved her off. "Just put it on the counter, dear. Don't bother me right now." I watched my daughter's face fall, her small hand dropping to her side. Inside, the living room was buzzing. My sister was there, glowing with pride as my dad showed off the golden grandchild's new toy set. Everyone clapped as he pressed a button and a little plastic car zoomed across the table. My son stepped forward, clutching his book. "Grandpa, can I read you a story?" he asked. My dad didn't even look at him. "Not now. We're busy." My son's shoulders slumped. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Dad, it would mean a lot if you let him read. He's been practicing." But my dad shook his head. "Claire, we don't have time. The kids are too much. You should have thought twice before dragging them over again." I blinked. "Dragging them over? They're your grandchildren." That's when my mom's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. "We don't have space for them anymore. We only have room for our real grandchild." The words hung in the air like poison. My daughter froze, tears welling in her eyes. My son clutched the book tighter, his little knuckles turning white. I felt something inside me crack. "What did you just say?" I whispered. My mom crossed her arms. "You heard me. The house is crowded enough as it is. We can't keep entertaining children who don't know how to behave. It's not fair to their cousin. Their cousin. The golden child who could do no wrong. My sister smirked, pulling him closer. See? This is why I don't like when you bring them here, Claire. They just make everything harder. My daughter let out a quiet sob and buried her face into my side. My son whispered, Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love us? My heart shattered into a million pieces. I grabbed their hands. We're leaving, I said, my voice shaking. But my dad wasn't done. As I turned to go, he called after me, maybe if you raised them better, we wouldn't feel this way. Every muscle in my body screamed to lash out, to yell, to make them feel the pain they just inflicted on my children. But I swallowed it down. I walked out the door with my head held high, my kids clinging to me like lifelines. Once we were outside, my daughter wiped her tears and whispered, Mom, did we do something wrong? I knelt down, holding both their faces in my hands. No, sweetheart. You did nothing wrong. Don't you ever believe that. This isn't about you. It's about them. But the truth was, it was about them, my parents, their cruelty, their twisted idea of family. And I knew the damage was already done. The humiliation didn't stop at the door. A week later, I heard from a neighbor that my parents had been bragging about their golden grandchild at church. They told people he was their only true legacy, their only hope for the family name. And they didn't even mention my kids. Not once. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run to the pulpit myself and tell everyone what they had done, how they'd told their own grandchildren to get out of their house. Instead, I swallowed the rage and smiled at my children, pretending I wasn't breaking inside. But at night, when the house was quiet and my kids were asleep, I let the tears fall. I replayed the scene again and again, my mom's words, my dad's indifference, my sister's smirk, my children's sobs. And every time, my chest burned hotter. I thought their cruelty ended there. That they had drawn the line with rejection, favoritism, and humiliation. But I was wrong. Because soon, I found out what they had been planning all along. And compared to that, kicking my kids out felt like nothing. After the day my parents kicked my kids out of their house, I thought the worst was behind us. I thought maybe if I just cut contact for a while, things would cool down. My kids were heartbroken, but I told myself distance was the best medicine. I was wrong. One evening, my cousin called me. She sounded hesitant, almost guilty. Claire, she said softly, I think you need to know something. I overheard your parents talking after church. They've been meeting with a lawyer. They're rewriting their will. I frowned, confused. Okay, but what does that have to do with me? She sighed. They're leaving everything, the house, the savings, the land, to your sister's son. The golden grandchild. Your kids aren't in it anymore. Not even mentioned. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. What? That can't be true. I wish it wasn't, she whispered. But I heard it myself. Your mom said she doesn't want her hard-earned legacy wasted on children who don't matter. Children who don't matter. I sat there in silence, staring at the wall, while her words echoed in my head. My kids. My babies. Erased like they didn't exist. That night, after I put my kids to bed, I stood in the hallway staring at their closed doors. My daughter had taped her drawings all over the walls of her room. My son kept his books stacked neatly by his bed, waiting for the day someone would listen to him read. And yet, in my parents' eyes, they were worth nothing. Later that week, my daughter crawled onto the couch beside me. She fiddled with her bracelet, the one she'd tried to give my mom, the one that was tossed aside, and asked in a trembling voice, Mom, why don't Grandma and Grandpa love us? The question gutted me. I forced a smile, blinking back tears. Sweetheart, they just don't understand what real love is. But we tried, she whispered. We were good. We were nice. I pulled her into my arms, holding her so tightly I thought I might break. My son came in quietly, sitting on the other side, his little voice barely above a whisper. Do they love our cousin more because he's better than us? I broke then. Tears poured down my face, soaking their hair as I whispered, no. No, you are not less. You are my everything. Don't you ever think you're not enough. But inside, I felt shattered. Because what could I tell them? That their grandparents had erased them on paper? That their names didn't even deserve to be written in the same ink as their cousins? For days, I went through the motions of life, dropping them at school, going to work, cooking dinner, but I felt like a ghost. Every time I thought of my parents, a wave of rage and despair washed over me. It wasn't about the money. I didn't care about the inheritance. It was about the principle. About my kids being treated as invisible. As unworthy. As nothing. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from my childhood. How I was always the overlooked one, the quiet one, the one who never shined bright enough. And now, it wasn't just me. They had taken that same cruelty and pointed it at my children. That was the lowest point I had ever reached. I felt erased. My kids felt unloved. And for the first time in my life, I wondered if I had been wrong to keep trying. If maybe I should have walked away years ago. But then something changed. One night, after another round of tears, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills and the picture my daughter had drawn of us, just the three of us holding hands under a bright sun. And suddenly, the tears stopped. I realized something. My parents had taken everything from me that they could: love, support, respect, even my children's place in the family. They had left me with nothing but pain. But in that pain, I found clarity. I couldn't change the past. But I could change what came next. I wiped my face, straightened my shoulders, and whispered to myself, enough. This ends now. That was the moment I stopped crying. I knew what I had to do. And my revenge would be something they never expected. After the night I stopped crying, I made myself a promise. My parents would never again hold power over me or my children. If they wanted to erase us, then I would make sure we rose higher than they ever dreamed, without them. I poured myself into work. I took every shift, every opportunity, every chance to climb. And slowly, things changed. I got promoted. Then promoted again. Eventually, I landed a new position at a larger firm, one that paid more than I'd ever imagined. I saved. I invested. I built a future brick by brick, not with handouts, but with grit. Years passed. My children grew. My daughter, once so timid and wounded, blossomed into a confident young woman who painted murals across the city. My son, the little boy who once asked why his grandparents didn't love him, found his voice in debate competitions, winning trophies that filled our shelves. We built our own family unit, just the three of us. And though the scars from my parents' rejection never fully disappeared, we were stronger. We were free. And then, they came crawling back. It started with a phone call. My mom's voice, shaky and small. Claire, we need to talk. Things have changed. I almost hung up, but curiosity made me listen. She told me my father's health was failing, that money was tight, that the golden grandchild, the one they gave everything to, had turned out spoiled and entitled. He wasn't successful. He wasn't the savior they'd built him up to be. In fact, he had drained them dry. Now, with their savings gone and their health failing, they turned to me. We're family, my mom pleaded. We need you. For a moment, the old part of me, the daughter desperate for their love, stirred. But then I remembered my kids' tears. I remembered my daughter asking why they weren't loved, my son whispering if their cousin was better than them. And just like that, my answer was clear. I agreed to meet them. We sat at the same dining room table where they once told my children they didn't belong. They looked smaller now, older, worn down by the weight of their own choices. My father cleared his throat. Claire, we were wrong. We shouldn't have treated you, or the kids, the way we did. But we need help. Medical bills. The house. Just a little support. I leaned back, studying them. Help? You erased my children from your will. You told them to leave your house because you only had room for your real grandchild. Do you remember that? My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were foolish. We didn't mean it, I shook my head. Yes, you did. You meant every word. And you carved it into their hearts. Do you know my daughter stopped drawing for years because she thought nothing she made would ever be good enough for you? Do you know my son cried himself to sleep, convinced he was invisible? They stayed silent. I built my life without you, I said firmly. My children thrived without you. And now, when you have nothing left, you come begging? No. You don't get to rewrite history because it suits you. My father tried one last time. We're family, Claire. I stood, pushing my chair back. Family is supposed to love you unconditionally. You didn't. You chose one child, one grandchild, and threw the rest away. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it. I left them sitting there, stunned and speechless. In the weeks that followed, the phone calls came. Pleading, apologizing, bargaining. I ignored them. Instead, I focused on something far more important, my kids' future. I took the money I had saved and set up trust funds for them. I invested in their education, their dreams, their independence. I also donated to local charities that supported children who had been abandoned by their families, kids who, like mine, were made to feel like they didn't matter. That was my revenge, not screaming, not fighting, not sinking to their level. My revenge was living well, rising higher, and making sure my kids never again doubted their worth. The twist? While my parents wasted everything on the golden grandchild, hoping he would be their legacy, I built one of my own. My children became my legacy. And they were stronger, brighter, and more loved than any golden child could ever be. I remember standing at my daughter's art exhibit years later, watching strangers admire her work, hearing them say, "She's so talented. So gifted." My son stood beside me, taller now, smiling with pride for his sister. In that moment, I realized, we had one. Family is supposed to love you unconditionally, I whispered. Instead, they chose one child and threw the others away. But I made sure they learned, love cannot be bought, and my children will never beg for it again. Family favoritism leaves scars deeper than anyone realizes. But in the end, betrayal reveals the truth of who people really are. So now I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you cut them off for good, or give them another chance? Tell me in the comments below, because I read every single one and I'd love to know what you think. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Thanks for watching, and remember, you and your kids deserve love, no matter what.